Okay, so for each of you really quick, just tell your story of how you went from leaving the church and kind of what it was about South Mountain that kind of really pulled you in. Let's go in the same order.
Okay, when I was a Mormon, I studied in Jerusalem for 6 weeks, and I just remember being in love with the New Testament. I couldn't get enough of it. So I think that is the reason that I always believed in God. I guess I was lucky that way. I just wasn't sure where he was. And so what I did, I had a very good friend back east who would talk to me a lot about God and Jesus, and I didn't really have that experience in Mormonism. We didn't talk about God and Jesus like they were present in our life all the time, and she did. So it was very impressive. It impressed on me a lot. So my daughter's boyfriend, who I really admired, was attending South Mountain. And when I made the decision that I wasn't going back to the Mormon church, I said, could I come with you and just see? You know, I want to learn more about the Bible. I knew that the Book of Mormon did not make sense to me. It never sunk in for me, ever. But the Bible did. So I was determined to figure out what was in the Bible, what was really in it. So I came, and quite honestly, I never stopped coming. The joy was immediate.
What'd you love about it?
Well, what I loved about it was that they talked about Jesus all the time, 24/7. It was a Jesus show, that's all. Every song is about Jesus. There was no talk about
Joseph
the men
Smith
in suits downtown,
the leaders.
It was all Jesus all the time, and I think I'm a Jesus girl for sure. And I love the music. I wasn't good in the Mormon church with the music because I could never keep that tone. And so I'd just kind of whisper. And I'd always make my kids sing though. But here I found myself just belting it out and raising my hand because the joy, I can't tell you the joy I feel worshiping God through music. And then to hear Pastor Paul and Pastor Rick, every single sermon, we have an aha moment that we talk about in our family. I just felt new. And then, now I get
But wait, there's more.
There's more.
Don't act now.
Hey, I remember about a year before I left Mormonism, I threw my hands up to God and I said, God, you know what? I just hate the scriptures. I'm never going to read them. I hope I can still get in. I did. I was like, I can't handle it. Because it was checking off that box. That's the only reason I was reading them. And I got here and I immersed myself in every class they had, every Bible study. I love the Bible. It is freedom. It is the gospel, and I don't mean the gospel as Mormons say. The gospel of Jesus Christ is so simple and joyful.
What is it to you? What is it to you? Sum it up. The gospel of Jesus.
The gospel of Jesus is that he got what I deserved. He loves me. There's nothing I can do to make him love me less. There's nothing I can do to make him love me more. The price he paid, when he did it, when he said it is finished, he didn't mean like, okay, I'm done hanging here. He meant, it is done. I paid the price. And then top it off with grace, and you're like, done. Grace is amazing.
So what makes you want to be good if you don't have all those rules?
Because
and
I
the
love
guilt.
God.
What?
Because I love God, and I'll do anything for him because he did it all for me. I serve God because I can't stand not to. He's amazing.
It's going to sound like I'm trying to make a joke, but I'm really not. It is more, love is more motivating than guilt and shame and fear. It is. Love and joy is more motivating than guilt and shame and fear and control.
May I add one more thing?
Please.
Probably one more, too.
She's a firecracker.
I am a sinner, and I love it. I can say it. I don't have to hide it. Like, I am a sinner, and it's okay. I have a sinful nature. I don't have to walk around pretending to be the perfect Mormon mom anymore. And I don't have to get my kids to God. That's their job. That's God's job. I don't have to be God anymore, John. I thought I had to be God. I controlled everything, everyone. I'm at peace. God is God, and I'm his child.
Has this improved your relationship with your children or not?
Yes.
How?
My children, well, number one, I'm a lot nicer. My gosh, I had to apologize to them. I'm so sorry. I didn't want you to wear that tube top or that two-piece swimsuit. I really didn't care, but I cared what people thought. I don't have to control their lives anymore. I don't have to look good for other people. I don't have to prove to my children that I'm an amazing person. I can be who I am. And so our relationship is more valuable. We get along great. In fact, just months after I left the church, they gave me this Tiffany cross. Just 2-3 months after I threw the bombshell on the family. They've been amazing. They have been amazing.
And are they still in, mostly, or?
I have one believing daughter, and
Believing in Mormonism? Okay.
And we support her fully, and she has a heart for God. And she's on her journey.
And then the others, family members?
The others are not Mormon, are not going to the Mormon church. I'm the only one that's had my name removed.
Any other Christians in there in the mix? Or are
Any
they
other Christians?
in your family, of your?
My immediate?
Yeah.
I think you're all Christians, aren't you? Yes.
Are they here?
Yes,
Raise your
they
hands.
are.
Are you guys on better terms with your mom now? Are you guys happier? More or less?
They think I'm a little crazy Jesus
Is this
lover,
the husband?
That's the husband.
That's good. The family's here supporting you. I love that. Hey guys, thanks for coming. Welcome. All right. So is she telling the truth? Raise your hand if she's telling the truth, everything she said so far. All right, she's not lying. Kids will tell you if you're lying. They'll say
Okay,
she's lying.
just one last thing.
Yes. One more thing.
For the first time, I'm not depressed in 28 years, 2 years without depression. Right, kids?
Your husband's going, that's true. All right, thank you. That's lovely. All right. What brought you to the church?
I can't match that.
You can't match that. We should just go home. Should we just go home? No, do your best. I'll help you out.
20 years between leaving the Mormon church and coming here. I 2 failed marriages, one with kids, one without kids. I was actually in a pretty dark place in my life, just kind of done with relationship. I'd done, basically done my best, I thought. I was doing everything I thought I could do. I was trying to just do life the best I could, be kind, loving, and it was not working. And I knew that. So I just kind of crawled into, I was just kind of living life at that point. And then I ran across a gentleman. I used to compete, shooting shotguns, shooting trap. At the gun club, I ran across a guy that immediately became friends with. He wasn't a believer. We were just good buddies. We hung out, we traveled together, shot trap different places around the state and down just around the area. And over the period of, I don't even know how long it was, a couple of years, I guess, 2.5 years, some things happened in his life, and he had become a believer. I had no idea. But through his friendship and the friend, I trusted him. He was great friend. Give me a second. Anyway, through that friendship, because I trusted him a lot, at some point I got invited to come to church at the warehouse when it was just the first unit there. I think they'd been around for a couple of years at that point, 250 people, real small little church. And for the first time in my life, I was listening to teaching that was just plain out of the Bible without any, this is what this means, this is what that means. They just taught the Bible. And my friends also began to give me some literature and books to read. And for the first time in my life, I began to read books that were well referenced, that actually the church wasn't paying them to write them. Let me put it that way. And it just made sense. Christianity made sense to me. The teaching of the Bible made sense to me, and so I became a believer. And after that, it's just been boy, what a ride. Just gained a huge passion to learn, to understand, to unpack some of the things that I was taught growing up in Mormonism that, you can't understand. You have to have somebody smarter than you tell you what's going on, and you'll be deceived. If you try to search things out, you'll be, Satan's really sly. 99% truth and 1% lie. He'll just get you. And so you'll be deceived. Well, I learned real quickly that I actually was intelligent enough to read and understand what I was reading. I was able to read the Bible and actually believe what it said in it. I didn't have to unpack it or try to interpret it or all these words people use. I just read it and it made sense. And it's just been an amazing journey. I mean, I'm a completely different person than I was 17 years ago. Oh gosh, I'm far more compassionate. I believe I'm definitely kinder. I love to help other people, where before I was just kind of about myself, just trying to survive. I was asked one time, what's the difference between, how you were in Mormonism versus Christianity? And I said, as in Mormon, I was very devoted. And I did things like home teaching and stuff like that I hated. But I did it because it was my assignment, and I did it because I had to do it. And in Christianity, I do what I do because I love to do it. Without consciously thinking about it. I love helping other people. I love serving. And it's a joy now, where before it was a duty. I don't know another way to put it. These were things that I didn't consciously try to do. I changed. I literally changed.
What aspects of your membership here have meant the most to you? What do you love most about?
The people. I mean, no doubt. I mean, that's what really attracted me. These people are sitting,
What about them?
Oh my gosh, they're just kind and loving. You walk in, they greeted you. When you come to church here, and I suspect you probably noticed this Sunday, people actually love to be here.
I totally noticed that.
Yeah.
It was like a beehive of joy. Everybody buzzing around being happy.
Love the beehive.
I was like, what is this? I don't trust this. This is too much happiness and joy for a church setting. I don't know. I don't know about this. They must have known I was coming. No, I'm just kidding.
No, totally understand. I've come to understand that all these years that I struggled, the divorces and things like that, all these years, God was really actually training me to do what I do now.
Talk about that for a second. So you lead a divorce group?
Yeah. Some point, somewhere along the way, I started out by helping adult singles. I was leading the Bible studies and stuff like that. And it didn't take us long to realize that we had a lot of divorced people in there, and quite a few of them were struggling. And somewhere along the way, somebody said, hey, do you think you could lead this? And I said, sure, might as well. I don't know, it's been like 12 years I've done it, and I still love it. In fact, we took a little break, and it's been driving me bonkers to not be in there doing it. I've seen lives transformed.
What does the group do for divorced people?
Well, we support them, actually. We help them walk through the emotion that they're going through. Divorce if you haven't been through a divorce, it's brutal. It is just simply brutal. It's one of the toughest things you'll ever do if you ever go through it. And people that come in there are very broken. They're hitting the bottom, you know. And so this is a biblically based, Christ-centered ministry that we help people heal from what they're going through, unpack what happened, learn from it, forgive, and put Christ in the center of their life instead of their family or their husband or wife or whoever it was that was driving their life. We put Christ in the center of it. And I've seen just some amazing life transformations coming out of that ministry. Yeah, it's a joy. I get the front row seat to it. It's cool.
What are some of the other special interest groups that the church has sort of support for? Just to give, or is that it? I don't want to put you on the spot if there aren't others, but.
Man, we've got. You heard me talk about Financial Peace University, which is, if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, we have a class that helps people go through that. We have a great community that meets on Wednesday night. These are some of my favorite people. It's called Celebrate Recovery, and people hear that and they're like, "Oh, is it like drug addiction?" There'd probably be people in there who would relate to that, but it's about dealing with hurts, habits, and hang-ups in life, and we're a big fan of helping people navigate that. I haven't met one person, myself included, who doesn't have a hurt, a habit, or a hang-up that they have to deal with. We've got
So it's addiction recovery.
No, that people who are addiction recovery, they're probably in the minority of the people who participate. It's hurts, habits, and hang-ups. And so a habit could be an addiction, but there are all kinds of other things. It could be codependency. It could be pornography. It could be struggling with anger. Unfortunately, unfortunately, our state leads the way in suicide, and we have a support group for people who are struggling with the aftermath of that in their life. We have a great community called Turning Point for people who are trying to figure out the differences between, okay, I grew up LDS, what is Bible-only Christianity? We have another great community called What is Christianity? And it's a lot of people who are skeptics. They're like, I don't know if I believe this, but what are the answers to these questions? So, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. We have 811 adults involved in these groups and communities that meet throughout the week. And we love providing a place for people to get their questions answered. We think every question deserves an answer. And we love providing a place where friendships can be cultivated.
All right, that sounds good. I like that. Okay, Emily, what brought you to the church?
Well, before I came to the church, I lived as a lesbian for 19 years. I had a handful of girlfriends, a couple boyfriends in the mix, but soon a girl would come along and catch my attention, and I would choose them over these young men. My final girlfriend, before I started coming to South Mountain, was not the best relationship. It was not physically abusive, but it was very emotionally abusive. It didn't start out that way. I fell in love with her two boys, more so than I did with her. I should have known from the very beginning that I should have ran away, because my brothers typically loved everybody that I dated, and they didn't like her from the start. She started off by simple thing, girls' night, I used to do with my friends, and she's like, well, why can't I go to girls' night with you? I'm like, because they're my friends and we're doing girls' night. She's like, well, I'm a girl. I'm like, yeah, but you're my partner. And so that was really hard. And I didn't like to fight about it after this, so I stopped doing girls' night, which meant I stopped hanging out with my friends. She didn't like me hanging out with any of my guy friends either, because that was too uncomfortable for her. So pretty soon it was me and her boys, her friends, and her family.
So your life kind of disappeared.
It did. And even my brothers, like, I fell into her lies of seeing my brothers as being hateful, and they didn't approve of our relationship, so I stopped seeing them, which meant I actually missed out on 3 years of my niece's life. My nephew was born, and I was there on the day he was born, but I didn't know him for the first 2 years. And looking back, I totally understand. My brothers wanted my niece and nephew to have a healthy life, and I wasn't living in a healthy relationship. So on top of that, I lost my job. So not only did I identify as a lesbian, but I also found my identity in my work. I was a workaholic. I loved to work. There was nothing like it, which fed into my people pleasing. I put in long hours. I loved what I did. But I got to a point where I couldn't find a job. I could find a job out of state, but nothing in state. And got to the point where I was opening a beer at 7 a.m. I was so dark. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what purpose was in life. During this time, I recall the conversation that I had with one of my really good friends' dad when I was coaching with her at Salt Lake Community College. It's about 8 years prior to that. He, in passing, asked me if I knew what the good news was. I had no idea what he was talking about. I'm like, no. I'm like, I don't know what the good news is. And he proceeded to tell me how Jesus died on the cross so that I could be saved. I was a little bit blown away and intrigued because really at that point I thought I was going to hell or maybe making the bottom kingdom of heaven, depending upon God's thoughts on where I was. Like that was where I was. And he also gave me a Bible. I didn't surrender my life that day. I didn't really think much of it, but it planted a seed. So fast forward to 2010. In my dark, deep moment, I recalled that conversation, and I'm like, you know what, I want to know what God thinks about homosexuality. So I actually started Googling. I'm like, I'm going to see what he thinks, and I found articles and blogs. I wanted to make God fit what I wanted him to believe so he could love me better. I started to get mad because I was reading all these people's opinions, and they were opinions, and nobody had the same opinion. So I'm like, this can't be accurate because everyone is so different, and not every single person is saying the same thing. So I remember that Bible, and I pulled it out, and I started reading the New Testament, and I fell in love with Jesus. Not the Jesus who was pre-existing with us, raising his hand, saying he was going to come and be sacrificed so that we all could be saved, but Jesus who was God, who came down and he gave his life for me. I was blown away at his kindness and how he hung out with all of these sinners, and I'm like, oh my gosh, if he can hang out with all these sinners, with like prostitutes and tax collectors, and the woman at the well, that story it broke me as I was reading it. And I'm like, he's talking to this woman during this time when men didn't talk to women. Women were seen as second-class citizens, and he was like having a conversation, and he loved on her, and he didn't judge her, and he could have condemned her and told her to like, get out of here, get out of my face, you're a sinner. But instead, he's like, wanted her to know him, and he in exchange wanted to know her. And in parting, my favorite thing was just like, hey, sin no more. You know, no condemning, no throwing guilt. I continued to read the New Testament, and I got to 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 9, and it brought me to my knees. Do you not know that evildoers will not inherit the kingdom of God? And I continued to read, neither the sexually immoral, and that's who I was. I was living for my flesh. I was such a sinner. I gave into every single instant gratification. I gave into my flesh. I became an alcoholic. I was smoking weed all the time, giving into every single thing, and I was tired of it. And then I continued to read that I could be washed and I could be sanctified and justified through Jesus Christ. That night, my partner came home from work, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I'm like, I'm gonna move into the basement until I figure out what's going on. I didn't tell her I was reading the Bible. I didn't want any influence from her. I decided I was going to go to South Mountain that following Sunday. And I didn't tell the Timmels because I didn't want them to have any influence, and I didn't want to give them hope that I was going to start coming to church. So I'm walking up, and there's this guy that walks in front of me, and he's wearing this white bandana, and he looked like a gangster. And he was covered in tattoos, and he was wearing a wife beater. And I'm like, I can totally do this church. So it was awesome. So I go and sit down. The music was awesome. But what really got me that day was Pastor Paul. And man, his message, it just got me. There was this guy, I assumed he was the leader of this church, and he told the congregation that he was a sinner in need of a savior. That was the first time that I'd ever heard a religious leader or my grandfather, who was leader of our family, like say that they were a sinner. Like all these men were so perfect, but this guy, like he was a sinner. And I'm like, I can do this church. So I continued to go and took my first class, which was boundaries, which is where I met this guy. I was definitely in need of boundaries, the thing that I love about that, it's kind of a silly story, but when I told Jim, not this Jim, but my friend Jim, what first class I was taking, he was so proud of me that I made that decision on my own. He's like, that's a great class for you. You need it. And I did. I needed boundaries. I needed boundaries for myself, for my brain. The funny thing is, as I got to know Jesus, and I got to, well, let me rewind. So from boundaries, I met this really great small group, and Jim was my small group leader. And they were so amazing. They gave me the space that I needed to figure out what I wanted and who God was. I asked a lot of hard questions, and they didn't give me the answers. They directed me so I could find those answers on my own. They didn't tell me what to think. They loved me through like my brokenness, my temptations, when I thought it was okay to smoke weed all the time. They just walked alongside me through all of that. I was able to like talk about every part of me, the grossest parts, and they were just there with me, which is really cool that he is sitting here with me right now. But through it all, the funny thing is my entire life before I became a Christian was driven by my feelings. I felt like I wanted to be with women, so I was with them. I felt like I always wanted to be drunk, so I did that. For the first time in my life, once I became a Christian, I actually started to use my brain. Before I became a lesbian, I let my family dictate what I did. I didn't think for myself. But I love who I am in Jesus, and I love that he wants me to have my own mind and to think my own way. And for the first time in my life, I have actually found joy, and I know what it is to be known, which is something I had sought my entire life, to be known and loved by Jesus and my church family.
So I've spent a ton of time studying LGBT Mormons, and so I have to ask a couple follow-up questions. Some of this may be a little bit personal, but so do you, in religious parlance, do you still experience same-sex attraction?
I am tempted. So yes, I do have temptations where I do have attractions. I will say that they're getting lessened. This last year has been my least amount of times, but yeah, I definitely still find women attractive.
Okay. Do you have plan or intention of trying to find a partner? I'm assuming it would be a male. Are your beliefs that to act on your same-sex sexuality is sinful?
Yes, I believe it's sinful. I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, and if you can't do that, then you should choose celibacy. Which I choose celibacy. I'm not opposed to getting married, but I love Paul. As growing up, especially in Utah, and especially being single, there's this stigmatism that you can't be single. It doesn't matter whether you're Christian or whether you're LDS, and I don't know if it's because it's Utah, but singleness is not appreciated very much. But when you read the New Testament, that's another thing that I love about the New Testament, is Paul's like, hey, you guys, don't get married unless you can't control the lusts in your groin, right? Like, I love that, and I'm like, yeah, I love that, because I still am not a big fan of marriage. I love God's plan for marriage. I love what it means. I think it is so beautiful, but I love how much I can do being single. I wouldn't be able to do, I love ministry. I would do ministry 24/7 if I could, but I also like to work, so I'm a little bit torn on that.
Do you pray for God to take away your same-sex attraction?
I don't.
Why not? Why not?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I pray for him to, take away my temptations. I do believe that we are all predisposed to different types of temptations, and we have the moral choice to choose whether we're going to give in to those temptations or whether we're going to choose life with God, right? You can't live in both camps. You have to choose one or the other. You have to know when you're grounded in Jesus. So I don't know. I've never prayed for them to go away. I guess I should. But I have faith in God that he's going to help me overcome my temptations.
So the survey that we did, surveying 1,612 Mormons, LGBT Mormons, 1,000 of them attempted to change their sexual orientation, and 0% reported that it was changed. The most common method of trying to change was through prayer and righteousness, and that was also the most damaging of all the reported attempts made. So that's a pretty low success number. So I'm actually happy to hear that you haven't tried to pray that to go away, based on the data that I've studied.
Yeah, the sad thing, people do believe that it's that easy, right? That there's nothing you have to do. The one thing, if you truly want to live a life for Jesus. There's so many other things you have to do. Not work, so that's where it gets really hard. You still have to put stuff in. Like for me, I had to change one community for another, right? I lived in the gay community. I had to replace it with another community. I had to join a Bible study so I could know God's word, because if you're not grounded in God's word, how can you know who he is and who we are in him? So I joined a Bible study, got with a group. I have awesome pastors that I'm able to ask really hard questions to. I have a great group of friends who hold me accountable that I can go to whenever I'm having struggles. You can't do it on your own, and that's what makes me really sad for people who say they try to pray it away. It doesn't work that way. You have to do life in community. That's why God built us, is to have relationships, to live in community, so we can love one another. But the biggest thing is being grounded in his word. I'm actually going to seminary school right now, and that has been the thing that has lessened my temptations even more, because if I'm not working, I am grounded in God's word, studying. And that's where I have found the biggest change in my life, is the more I'm grounded in him, the less the temptations are.
A couple more questions. Our study also found that the single worst choice someone could make in terms of quality of life, depression, sexual identity distress, internalized homophobia, was the choice of being celibate. So this isn't me condemning the path you've chosen or even trying to opine about it. It's just referencing data that basically said men, women are made to, that we're sexual creatures, and that's an important part of health and well-being. So the prospects weren't good for people who chose celibacy in my study, our study. Do you have a thought about that? Can you relate to that? It sounds like you're doing great, so.
I do have, so we're all sexual sinners, definitely. We're sexual beings. God made us to have sex. And it's so beautiful, his purpose for sex and like what that is to represent, which I won't get into that right now. But how can people not be depressed? Have you seen our world? Like, you watch TV, and that's the message that we're receiving all the time, is that you have to have sex, you have to be in a relationship. All of our TV shows are just showing people having sex constantly. Music is talking about sex. All of our friends are like, what, you're not with anybody? How can you not be depressed, right? And how can you not live a life of celibacy? I mean, how can you choose to live a life of celibacy when you receive counter message from every single person? Like, honestly, I think that you can find true joy when you surround yourself with good people who know what your intentions are, rather than the world. Like, I personally don't watch a lot of TV. I'm very particular about what I listen to. I don't want the world telling me how to live my life. I want to make my own choices. I think kids, I'm so fearful for the kids these days, like even more so than, like, I've now am part of our high school ministry, because I think this sexual message is so damaging to people who are gay, people who are straight. Like, we are so focused on sex, and sex outside marriage is not healthy. One of my favorite authors, he wrote this book called Loveology, and he talks about every time you have sex with somebody, you give a piece of yourself away. And the more people you have sex with, you continually become this empty shell until there's nothing left of you. You're like this ravaging beast who goes out there, and you're just trying to seek that next person that you're going to have sex with. And to me, like, that is such a sad and broken life. And how can people not be depressed?
Are you open to or interested in a mixed orientation marriage where you would marry a man?
Absolutely. I'm attracted to men. I think they are very nice to look at. I love guys. Like, I've always had great guy friends. I have 2 brothers who I think are so wonderful. I have mainly uncles. I like guys. They're really cool.
So you're open to that?
I definitely am. But
Are you hoping for that? Are you praying for that?
No.
Because you're happy.
I am so,
being single.
I've actually never been happier in my entire life. I've never known this joy and this contentment of where I am right now. I'm not opposed to it, but this person, I have super high standards, so they have to love Jesus more than I love Jesus, and that's a really tough thing.
How about the same? How about love Jesus the same as you love Jesus?
Okay, they could, and dogs have to sleep in the bed, so.
Oh, okay. Between you or anywhere, okay. Have you considered, I mean, there are plenty of Christians that just maybe interpret the Bible in ways that allow for them to be Christian and gay or lesbian. Have you studied how other Christians have found a way to kind of keep those two things together? Or are you even aware of that line of thought?
I have a ministry called that I co-lead called Homosexuality and the Christian. So we do book studies, and we actually have people who come in our study who have partners. They're married. They actually attend our church. So
They're same-sex married?
huh?
Okay. As a part of your ministry?
They come and participate in it
Here in South Mountain?
here in South Mountain.
So there are LGBT members
We actually,
and same-sex married
Yep.
members. They're welcome
yes.
to participate.
Which is why I chose South Mountain, because they love you. It doesn't matter where you are. One of my favorite things that Rick has said is that, we're not here to change people's sexual orientation. We're here to change people's orientation to Jesus. And it truly is.
So do they feel like second-class citizens here when they talk about coming here? Can you speak for them as to what their experience is here, knowing that the church sort of has a theology that maybe frowns upon their sexuality? How can they still feel welcome here?
The one thing that the church does really well, they don't preach it from the pulpit, right? We have conversations outside.
So there's not a lot of LGBT talk during
No.
the sermons?
No, because we're focusing on helping people to know who Jesus is. We're not here to make people feel guilty. We're here to love on them and let them know we all need to know who Jesus is on our own accord. We can't have people telling us who Jesus is.
So they feel welcome with the sermons?
Yeah, it's just the other day, I hate telling stories where you're like the hero of your own story, but will you give me permission to do that? So there's like 4 or 5 gay guys that came up to me after the service a couple of weeks ago, and they asked me this question that you're asking, and I shared with them the same thing Emily just shared. Hey, our goal isn't to change your sexual orientation. We want to orient everybody to Jesus, and that everybody would get to the point where they say, Jesus, I trust you more than I trust me. I trust you with my identity. I trust you with my relationships, my sexuality, my money, my schedule, all of that kind of stuff. Jesus, I trust you. And this one guy, I said, hey, you want to ask any follow-up questions? We'll chat about it. And they're like, no. And the other guy goes, man, you guys are a big deal. We love it here. I can't remember where they were coming from the South. They're like, we just love it here. And we've heard story after story after story of that, and I don't think it's because we're a big deal, although it was kind for him to say, is we love Jesus. Every single person is a sexual sinner. I am a sexual sinner. We all need the love and the grace and the forgiveness of Jesus Christ, and so we try to make a big deal out of Jesus, and so I think that's why people love it here, because Jesus is incredible.
What do you mean everyone's a sexual sinner? If you're either not having premarital sex or you're faithful to your spouse.
Yeah. There's this idea. It's not. I heard a pastor say this one time. He's like, he says, it's not like gay sex sends you to hell and heterosexual sex that doesn't get you to heaven. He said, I happen to know this by experience. And I just thought, well, that's kind of a funny way to hear a pastor describe it. It's Jesus talking about this. We have a tendency, right? We have a tendency to want to look at our behavior. I know sometimes when I want to skate by, I want to justify myself with my behavior, but Jesus always took things to the heart. One time Jesus was talking to a group, maybe a group this size, and he said, listen, you've heard it said that basically don't have sex outside of marriage, but I'm telling you, if you look on somebody with lust, it's the same. He's talking about the root cause in our heart, that it's not just what we do, that there's a broken desire inside of me. My moral compass is broken. The needle points to me as me being the ultimate authority and me being the guy instead of trusting Christ and what he designed and what he wants for me. And maybe, I don't know, I'm just speculating here, maybe one of the reasons that the people who I'm sure were incredibly honest and vulnerable in the study that you shared and what Emily shared is Emily's not talking about repressing something that's there and pretending like it's not there. It's, okay, this is a reality about me, but I choose to think about what's true, and I choose to delight in what's true, and I trust the process in which God changes me from the inside out. It's not me working my way, improving it. He's changing me from the inside out. And I don't know if I'm as courageous as Emily is, but I'm pretty selfish. The word for lust in the New Testament is the same word for greed. And if you think about it that way, I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm sexually greedy. I'm a luster. I need Jesus' love and grace to change me from the inside out. It doesn't matter how I behave. I'm broken on the inside, and I need him to change me from the inside. Is that helpful?
It's helpful. Thank you. One last thing, Emily, and this is just because I've spent so much time thinking and talking about this. It is super common in the world of Christianity for gay and lesbian Christians to sort of hold themselves up as role models, sort of to tell people you're not doing this, but to tell people you can change, to promise change, and to even sort of hold themselves up as exemplary role models for living a righteous or a straight life after being gay and lesbian. And then fast forward 3 years or 5 years or 10 years later, you find out that either they weren't being honest about who they were or they had a big crash. And just this week in Mormonism, we learned about a couple, they're named Josh and Lolly Weed, where 5 years ago, Josh and Lolly come out as being in a mixed orientation marriage where Josh says, hey, I'm Mormon and I'm gay, but I love my wife and I'm sexually attracted to her and we have the best sex ever and we love each other and everything's awesome. Fast forward 5 years, they're getting divorced. He's apologizing to the LGBT community and he's saying, I'm really sorry that I gave all these people hope or influenced them, or my stories were used as hammers against other LGBT people to make family members push them into religious belief, when in reality, I couldn't even keep it up myself. And so, are you aware that there's this long, decades-long history of Christians leading ministries like yours that ended up sort of being rotten to the core? And are you mindful of that as you are a role model and as you lead others down a path that for many just proves to be unsustainable? I'm not picking on you, I'm just sharing my experience and wondering how much you've thought about this and how much you're aware.
Yeah, I definitely know. I like to study all things LGBTQ as well, right? It's good to be aware of what's going on. There also, I know there are people who have left being Christians. And I don't know why. I don't know their story. I don't know where they are. But there are also other people just like me who have led ministries and have done it for a really long time, and they've been great role models. And they're the ones that I look up to. Like Rosario Butterfield. She is an amazing woman. She's one of my favorite authors, who I love to read always. It's easy for any human to slip up. We're all sinners, right? And we all might have that time when we're going to fall in our lives. It's hard when the gay community, when you are making that choice, because I think there is a spotlight on you. There are definitely people who find out my story and they want to be that person who breaks me, who makes me cross that line. So I'm very discerning in who I spend my time with. I really am. I'm discerning in the alone time I spend with them. When I meet with people, I always meet in public, but I just think we all as human beings, it doesn't matter whether you're gay or straight, if you're on a path, you need to stick it. And I'm very intentional with my life. I think so many people are so unintentional with the way that they live their lives. And if you truly love Jesus and you truly want to live your life for Jesus, you have to be so intentional with your choices, especially as a leader. I hold myself higher, and that's actually one reason I do love being a leader in our church, because it holds me accountable. I've had moments where I've talked to Rick, even a few years ago, where I had a really strong temptation, and I brought it to, I'm like, hey Rick, there's this person, she was someone that I was not seeing. She was like a doctor that I was seeing, and I had attractions towards her, and I brought that to the light with Rick, and it was really cool, like his response to me. But I do believe that when you are in a leadership position, that you have to hold yourself to even higher standards.
Okay, last question. So what about this idea of, instead of looking at your sexuality as a curse or as a sinful or as brokenness, just saying this is how God made me, and God made me this way, I love who I am, and seeing it as something to celebrate instead of something to sort of view with disdain. That's something that Josh Weed wrote about how he still considers himself Christian, he still considers himself a believer, but instead, he's just refuses, number one, to view his core nature as evil or sinful in that way. And then two, he refuses to deny himself love and companionship that's oriented with who he is. you know, and it's not me trying to persuade you, it's just trying to say, is that an option for you, or not?
No, and you're fine with persuading. I like when people try to push me because it makes
No, I don't believe in doing
helps me
that.
to grow stronger roots into Jesus. I love God, and I love Him so much that I want to obey Him, and I know that the plan that He has for me, and I want to stay the course because of my love for Him. And to be honest, I can't imagine living life any other way. It makes me cry. Like, I have sobbed when I have had my temptation moments, like cried. That's when I have cried, and I'm like, please God, help me not sin against you, because I love Him so much, and I don't ever want to go back to that lifestyle. To be honest, it wasn't a great lifestyle. I had a partner every 3 to 5 years, right? It was like I met someone new, 2 months later we're living together, 3 to 5 years later I'm breaking up, and just this pattern. And I don't know a lot of gay relationships that have long marriages.
They're there, but
They're very
for
small.
you, that wasn't your experience.
John, could I ask you a question?
Oh,
Would that be all right?
is he allowed to ask
Turn
me?
the table?
I don't know.
Is that
I
fair?
don't-
Can we do
Okay,
that?
yeah, you can.
You know, I appreciate you asking these questions because these represent the spirit of the times. I mean, these are things that people really want to know about. This is something that we're wrestling through. And buried down deep, somewhere deep in these questions is this: what does it mean to be human? Where do sexual ethics come from? Are we designed? Or are we an accident? Is there a purpose for my life that I should discover, or do I get to determine it? Do I get to make up what my purpose in life is? And we can have fantastic conversations like we're having now. It'll be hard to really understand where we're coming from and really understand what someone means unless we know the answer to those questions first. You know, right now it's interesting. I'm sure we're all watching the Me Too campaign. And we've been bombarded with stories of men who've used power and influence and notoriety or whatever to get what they wanted sexually. We say, that's wrong. You don't get to make up your own rules. So there's something inside of us that we just intuitively know. You don't just get to make it up. There's something that we should all bend to. Even if our heart doesn't naturally line up to it, there's something we should bend to. What is that? Where does that come from? And what Emily's talking about, and what a lot of everyone else here would say, is we believe that God designed us for a purpose. And the most joy, the most thriving in life is found when we trust Him and we let Him bring us into alignment with the purpose for which He made us.
I sense that was a hypothetical question, not intended for a direct answer. And that's
So I'll ask you this question: what does it mean to be human? Where do sexual ethics come from?
I respect those who find their grounding for sexual ethics in God or in the divine. And I think as long as the outcome of that is respect for self and others and health, emotional health as well as physical health, I'm celebrating. I do know men and women who are in same-sex marriages who have physical health and mental health and respect for self and others, and who have genuine long-term committed love. I know several, but I also know that marriage is fraught, period, heterosexual or same-sex marriage, and life gets complicated. I know we're almost kind of running out of time. I'm hoping we can go a little bit over. I do want to have a kind of a theological and doctrinal conversation with you, but maybe I'll pause on that. Is that okay? We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
But can we give Emily a round of applause for taking the heat on those questions? Thank you. Wasn't she a good sport? All right. So Dave, we only have just a couple minutes, so I'm going to ask you to kind of tell your story briefly. If it's okay, I don't want to cut you short, but there are some final questions I want to ask. Is it okay if we go a little over? Is that okay? And you guys don't feel like obligated to stick around. There are some burning questions that I have. I want to have a dialogue, but I know that we're going to go a little bit over. But that's what we do on Mormon Stories. We go over. So, But let's conclude this part two, Dave, with what brought you to South Mountain.
Yeah, so, when we got to the point where we were starting to visit other churches, we'd actually thought about maybe just staying, knowing what we believed and that we could teach our kids. And for us, it became too much of a challenge, I think, trying to constantly correct things that our kids are being taught. And we really wanted them to be immersed in the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. And so as we started visiting different churches, and we really had a hunger for that, I remember my wife, we went to one church and she said, feels like gospel doctrine in here. I mean, that was her comment. It was so, it was just, the thing we love about SMCC, I think that finally made us come here, is that the way that the gospel is presented is it's presented in a way that is doable. It is doable. It doesn't, you're given a message. They get into the scriptures to support kind of the, to draw us, to draw the Bible into the theme, and you leave having these concepts and understanding. We have great discussions afterwards. It just seemed very doable. We loved, especially for having our kids come out. There was a great youth program here that we felt was very inviting, and our kids loved it. And so I think for us, it was just really a great fit for what we were looking for in that transition.
And the things you love most about it now?
I really did love I do love that no one's made to do anything. You're not called to do, youth ministry or whatever. I mean, it really is volunteer. And as a result of that, you get people in those positions that love to serve. They really do. They love it. No one's holding any guilt over your head for it. I loved the men's group, the small men's group. That was the first time, and I remember that. Somebody else mentioned it up here, but hearing a pastor from the stage say that they were a sinner, that they had sins, whatever it was. I mean, that was pretty cool revelation there to hear that. And then to be able to go into a men's group where you sit around with these guys who are at all different stages of life, and they're just completely open. I mean, I really did find my identity in what other people thought about me. As long as what they thought about me is what I wanted them to think about me. I mean, I wanted them to know that I was a worthy priesthood holder. It's very important, very important. And for me to show a crack of my sinful nature or anything was just, And so I lived in this kind of prison, and to come here and to just be able to just say, yeah, I'm a sinner. Yeah, I struggle with that too. And hear 5 other guys say, oh yeah, absolutely, we all do. But the answer is the same, which is Christ took the punishment of all of that and gives us his worthiness freely. And so you're not working to get up to some level where all of a sudden now, it activates God's love or God's grace, or, it's just, it was freeing. It was great. I love it. Love it here.
A lot of post-Mormons love their Sundays now, and they call it Second Saturday, where they can just do whatever they want and have fun, spend time with the family, go hiking, snow skiing, connect with others. What makes it so wonderful that you want to give up that Second Saturday?
We want to give up the Second Saturday?
Or at least part of it. That's how someone might,
what you're saying, yeah.
and choose to go to church.
Oh man!
After you've been
I'm
quoted.
just going to remember this. And even now, we're actually excited to go to church. We're excited for it, and it's like you go through the week, and it's really something I look forward to. As before, where it was dreading it. It really is something that we look forward to, and when we miss, we really do miss it. It's a completely different dynamic than what we're used to.
Do any of you else enjoy going to church here? Wow, look forward to it. All right, well, let's give our panelists a round of applause for their beautiful stories. We want to make sure you feel welcome to stay. For the theological doctrinal talk, do we want to bring Paul back up, or?
Pretty smart dude.
Is he a smart dude? Can someone grab a chair for, maybe have Paul and maybe if it's okay, let's see, Keri, if you can sit on that chair on the end, maybe we'll have Paul come sit by Rick. We want everyone to still feel comfortable participating. Don't fall off the edge of that stage. Maybe turn your couch just a little bit this way. And what I'd like to do for part 3, and again, those of you who need to go, I'm so sorry for going long, but this is really important to me, and I think it'll be important to my listeners. So I want to thank those of you who need to leave. Thank you so much for coming. It's been great having you. And for those who want to stay, I'm glad you're sticking around. So, Mormons believe that missionary work needs to be done in twos. So you guys are going to play the role of the missionaries, if that's okay. Is that all right? And this is not a bash. This is not me being critical or cynical or negative. This is not me trying to enter into any type of argument. This is me sort of saying, wow, I loved my experience here. I loved the energy. I loved the community when I was LDS. I loved so much of my participation in the church. I didn't leave the church kicked me out. Having said that, I've attended many churches and have never really felt either doctrinally or just spiritually kind of like it fit, like it made sense, like it belonged. So I'm going to sort of put myself in investigator mode, and I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions that come sincerely from my heart and mind about questions that I would have if I were to ever kind of consider joining. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. So starting, and by the way, I took so many notes when I was here. There's so many cool things that I experienced. Let me go through the list of all the things that I loved as I was coming here. I thought it was awesome that you had coffee. I thought it was awesome how many volunteers were here, unpaid, willing to support. Your kids' programs were phenomenal. Like, I would have thought that Mormons had the market on sort of childhood religious education. And I looked into each of those little windows, and the kids were just having a great time, and the volunteers were all, there was a lot. I know you guys do background checks on the people who are spending any time with the children or youth, that the youth are protected. I thought that was really cool. I love the rock band. It was inspiring. You do small groups. Can you talk about what those are really quick?
Small groups are essentially friends who get together. They're groups of...
It's like Bible study groups?
Yeah,
basically?
8, 10, 12 people, whatever they meet in homes. A lot of times they'll eat together, and they will do a Bible study. Many of them will do a Bible study that's based on the message that they heard on Sunday, and we write questions to go along with that. And the goal is to encourage each other and hold each other accountable and to help each other as they take their next step in applying things that they're learning. But these are people who go on vacations together. These are people who become best friends. These are people who do birthday parties together. These are people who become family.
One of the other things about our small group is that's the support system that we encourage. So if there's a death in the family, a birth, you mentioned birth, if there's any kind of critical need, that's the first line of care for everybody.
And what if you don't like someone in your group? Can you vote them out? How does that work? Does that happen?
It's
Self-organized?
it's people that it's a fellowship of sinners, and to just recognize that and be open about it. You know, not all groups stay together for a long time, but it's where most of the people find their true Christian friends.
And you have some means of connecting people up to join groups. Do groups have their own like little constitutions and charters about what the rules will be?
No.
Okay. All right. I thought it was super high tech. This place is super high tech. Multi-cameras, like again the jumbotrons, the PowerPoint presentation, really sophisticated music production. how long did it take to get those sort of level of production standards?
Well, it started small. Mike Bell's over here with his wife, Joni. He helped start the church too. And Joni was our singer, and Mike played piano, and that's how we started. And about 3 months into it, I put my hands around his neck and said, go find a guitar player. We need to get this thing going here. So he found somebody, and the rest is history. But what's kind of cool is what you saw up here was Mike's son, so second generation. And
He was great. You did a great job.
and then my son.
I heard you were the backup, but you were fabulous.
So you just raise your worship leaders, right, Mike? That's how you do it. Just have.
And it's like, I hear your youth group has a band sort of as part of the youth group.
Mm-hmm.
So like you go to church in a youth group and you're like playing in a rock band. How cool is that? Right? It's super cool. All right. Okay. So there's another church that I've heard of, like this one, called Alpine Church. And so I was thinking there might be a rivalry. And one thing I was really impressed with is that Pastor Rick spoke about this other rival church in a really friendly manner. Talk about that for a second. Like I'm used to churches being a little bit competitive.
When did I do that? I think I'm getting credit for something I don't deserve. I know.
Was it Paul?
Paul might have done it. We love.
Yeah, I know Brian. He's the pastor.
Okay, it must have been Paul. Yeah.
When they were getting off the ground, we connected, and he brought his leadership team to South Mountain, and we love to talk shop and philosophy of ministry and how to do church, and they do a great job.
So it's very collaborative.
We've sent many people who are moving from this area up to northern Utah. We said, yeah, connect with Alpine. They're a great church.
I like that. I like that sort of spirit of cooperation, not competition. So I noticed there are a lot of people of color in the audience. Not, half, but it seems as though people of color feel welcome here.
I hope so. I agree with you.
Yeah, I noticed that. Very low pressure. I noticed people in the audience taking notes as you were doing your sermon. And that's very different because in my tradition, there's a lot of zoning out sort of on the phone. Not to criticize, that's just what I've observed. A lot of people in the audience sort of had their notepads out and they were like taking notes. I think that's a credit to the quality and the content of your service. What version of the Bible do you use and why?
Most of the time we use the New International Version, and it's not the newest edition of the New International Version, but that's the most widely read translation of the Bible in modern English language. So it's most accessible to the most amount of people.
And it's pretty accurate or pretty well translated or
researched.
well researched. Okay. Let's see. I loved how practical the sermons were. You really wouldn't get a sermon in the LDS Church on sort of going a level deeper on sort of financial responsibility. You might get sort of a stay out of debt as like a admonition, but actually digging in depth to a practical issue, you probably just would never get. To what extent are your sermons just trying to be practical?
Well, one of the things that is a huge value to us, and this is something I adopted when I came here. This is South Mountain started this way from the beginning. Is the truth of the Bible should be explained in ways that are helpful and hopeful. We believe that truth is hopeful. We believe that it is helpful. And I mentioned that when in graduate school I studied philosophy, and a lot of times philosophers are criticized as telling you something you already know in a way you don't understand. We don't want to do that here. We want people to go, I get it, that makes sense. I want that, because we really do want good things for people. And we think that God's word is understandable and should be helpful and is incredibly practical.
One of the things we like to do is do different types of sermons, but we definitely have 3 or 4 series during the year that we internally call wisdom series. And just showing that the Bible is so wise in how to live life. And for a lot of people, they're just motivational talks because they don't believe the Bible. But we're hoping that if they see that the Bible is wise on how to live life, that they'll someday trust the Bible for their spiritual needs as well. So that's kind of the method behind the madness.
So what are some of
Behind the method.
what are some of the other types of topics that you might cover in a year's worth of sermons? Just rattle off 10.
So typically a calendar year would have something in the summer that are standalone messages because people go on vacations a lot, but anything from the 5 catalysts for growth in your life, what kind of things help people connect with God on a daily basis and that sort of thing, or what things improve your spiritual life. We always have a kind of a connecting type of sermon series in the fall when people are coming back to church on a regular basis after a vacation season, and that's usually something that is provocative and very something that somebody would want to invite somebody to, because it's going to connect you to God in a way that maybe is unexpected.
Give me an example.
We just did a series called Control Freak. That's always started in the fall, and it's all about faith. Faith is not a feeling, is one. Faith is not a force. These are just different topics throughout the series. And so we did a big series on faith. We did a series on the life of David in the Old Testament. Of course, then we did Christmas. Right now we're doing a wisdom series. We're about to do a book study in a couple of weeks starting on 2 Corinthians. The first one, it's called Paradox, and we're looking at a series of things that it seems like it's contradictory, but upon further review, you discover that it's complementary. It's actually true.
It's straight, right out of the 2 Corinthians.
2 Corinthians, studying the books in the New Testament, yeah.
And we'll do married series, we'll do parenting series, things like that as well.